He was the voice of Troy McClure, the face behind the unfrozen caveman lawyer, a Saturday Night Live legend, Phil Hartman. I mean, he was a comedic force, the kind of guy who could just, make you laugh by raising an eyebrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Just pure talent.
And they called him the glue, right?
Yeah.
The steady, reliable presence on a show known for its wild energy.
Definitely.
But behind those laughs, there's a darker story unfolding.
Yeah. The contrast between his public persona and the reality of his personal life, it's incredibly striking.
Like something out of a Hollywood thriller, only this time it wasn't a script. Imagine this, okay? It's May 1998.
Okay.
The world wakes up to the news that Phil Hartman, this beloved comedic icon, is dead. And it wasn't an accident. He was shot by his wife, Brynn, who then tragically took her own life.
It's a story that it just leaves you speechless.
It sent shockwaves through Hollywood.
Yeah.
It left everyone asking, how could this happen?
It was a tragedy that defied easy explanations. Here was a man seemingly at the top of his game, a man who brought laughter to millions, meeting such a horrific end.
Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. The complexities behind the headlines. We're going to explore the lives of Phil and Brynn Hartman, peel back the layers of their relationship, and try to understand the forces that led to that fateful night.
Yeah, it's important to note that understanding isn't about condoning or excusing actions.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's about trying to piece together a puzzle with some very dark and complicated pieces.
Exactly. So let's start with Phil. Everyone knows his iconic characters, but what was he like beyond the stage and the screen?
Well, you touched on something earlier, calling him the glue. And this wasn't just a catchy nickname. It was a reflection of how he was perceived by his peers. I mean, Phil was known for being incredibly talented, yes, but also dependable, hardworking, and collaborative. There are countless stories about him going above and beyond to help other performers, to elevate a sketch, to be a calming presence, in a sometimes chaotic environment.
He sounds like the kind of guy you'd want to have a beer with after a long day.
Absolutely, yeah. And yet there's also this interesting duality. While being this supportive, present figure in his professional life, he was also described as incredibly private and conflict avoidant in his personal life.
That's interesting. Do you think that tendency to avoid conflict played a role in his relationship with Brynn?
It's certainly something to consider. You see, Brynn, a former model and aspiring actress, met Phil at a time when his career was skyrocketing. And while she was supportive of his success, reports suggest she struggled with her own feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, particularly as she, navigated the world of Hollywood.
It's that classic living in the shadow scenario, right? How common is that dynamic when one partner achieves massive success and the other feels like they're fading into the background?
Oh, it's more common than you might think. And it can be incredibly challenging. Think about it. You're constantly surrounded by reminders of your partner's achievements, attending events where you're so-and-so's wife, and facing constant comparisons. This can be particularly difficult for those who have their own aspirations and ambitions.
Yeah, it's almost like a pressure cooker, especially in a high-stakes environment like Hollywood.
Exactly. And for Brynn, this pressure seemed to be compounded by her personal struggles with substance abuse and mental health issues.
Yeah,
Now, these are complex issues on their own, but when you add them to an already strained relationship dynamic, the potential for things to escalate becomes quite high.
So we have Phil, a talented, successful man who avoids conflict, and Brynn, his wife, struggling with her own demons and feeling increasingly overshadowed by his fame. Not exactly a recipe for a smooth sailing relationship, right?
No, not at all. And it's important to remember that these dynamics often play out over time. It's rarely just like a sudden explosion.
Right.
It's a slow burn,
Yeah,
a buildup of resentment and frustration, miscommunication.
like a pressure cooker, as you said.
Exactly.
And tragically, in this case, that pressure cooker did eventually explode.
It did. And the events of that night, May 28, 1998, they're incredibly difficult to process, even now. We know that Brynn had been out with a friend earlier that evening and had reportedly been using cocaine and alcohol.
Oh, wow.
She returned home and an argument erupted between her and Phil.
And this is where things take a truly horrifying turn, right?
Yes. In the early hours of the morning, while Phil was asleep, Brynn retrieved a handgun and shot him multiple times, killing him instantly.
God. It's hard to even fathom the level of despair and rage that must have been present in that moment.
It is, and it's a stark reminder, I think, that substance abuse can dramatically alter a person's state of mind. impairing judgment, escalating emotions to a very dangerous degree.
And the tragedy doesn't end there.
No. After shooting Phil, Brynn fled to a friend's house, confessed to what she had done, and was driven back home. When law enforcement arrived, she tragically took her own life.
Leaving behind 2 young children
Yeah.
who were in the house during the entire ordeal.
Yes. Sean and Birgen. Just 9 and 6 years old at the time. They were thankfully physically unharmed, but the emotional scars of that night are, they're unimaginable. To lose both parents in such a violent, traumatic way, it's heartbreaking.
It really is, and it's a reminder that the ripples of tragedy extend far beyond the immediate victims.
Yeah.
It's the families, the friends, the community left grappling with the aftermath. And in this case, it was a global community of fans, really, who had come to love Phil Hartman through his work.
Absolutely. This wasn't just another Hollywood scandal. This was the death of a man who brought joy to millions, and it left people reeling, trying to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the horrifying reality of his demise.
We've talked about Phil's conflict-avoidant nature. Do you think that played a role in the tragedy? Could things have been different, maybe, if he had addressed the issues in his marriage more directly?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it's certainly a question worth exploring. We often see a pattern of escalating behavior in these types of situations. One partner might withdraw or avoid confrontation, while the other becomes increasingly volatile and desperate for attention.
And those patterns can be incredibly difficult to break, especially without outside help.
Exactly. And that's one of the most heartbreaking aspects of this case, I think, the sense that perhaps with the right intervention, with access to mental health resources and support, this tragedy could have been prevented.
So we have this successful, beloved comedian and his wife, both battling their own demons in a way. Their relationship was like a powder keg of unaddressed issues, fueled by substance abuse, mental health struggles. And then that one terrible night, it all came crashing down.
It's a stark reminder that things are rarely as simple as they seem. Behind the facade of success, behind the laughter and the public persona, there can be a world of pain and struggle.
And this case really highlights how important it is to pay attention to the warning signs, both in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. We might see glimpses of those struggles, the mood swings, the withdrawal, the substance abuse, but it's so easy to look away.
It is.
To tell ourselves it's not our business, or that it will somehow get better on its own.
And sometimes those warning signs are incredibly subtle. It might be a change in someone's demeanor, a withdrawal from social activities, or an increased reliance on alcohol or drugs to cope with stress.
It's about being attuned to those shifts, to those subtle cues that something might be amiss.
Exactly. And it's about creating a culture where it's okay to talk about these things, where seeking help for mental health issues is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
Because the truth is, mental health affects all of us. It doesn't discriminate based on fame, fortune, or social status. And the consequences of ignoring it can be devastating. As we've been talking about Phil and Brynn, I keep coming back to this idea of twisted love. It's a theme that runs through so many of these cases we cover here on CrimePod Castle.
It certainly does. The Phil Hartman case in particular, it really throws this harsh light on the darker side of love, the way that passion and insecurity, mental health struggles, the pressures of fame, they can all get so tangled up in this incredibly toxic and ultimately destructive dance.
That's a reminder that love on its own doesn't conquer all, right? Sometimes it's the very thing that becomes distorted, twisted, leading to unimaginable consequences.
And what's fascinating here is how often we see these cases where the outward appearance of the relationship is just so at odds with the inner turmoil, With Phil and Brynn, you have this successful, seemingly happy couple, but beneath the surface, there were these deeply rooted issues that were never fully addressed.
Do you think that's maybe part of why this case resonated so strongly with the public? Because it shattered this illusion that success equals happiness, that if you're talented and famous, your personal life must be perfect.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah. Phil Hartman's death really challenged our assumptions about what a happy family looks like. It forced us to confront the uncomfortable reality that even those who seem to have it all can be struggling with very real, very human problems.
And it highlights the importance of not making assumptions about other people's lives, right? We never truly know what's going on behind closed doors.
Precisely. We might see glimpses, a strained smile, a withdrawn silence, a change in behavior. But we often dismiss those signs, telling ourselves it's none of our business or that things will work themselves out.
But sometimes those signs are a cry for help, a desperate attempt to communicate that something is deeply wrong.
And that's why it's so crucial to create an environment where people feel comfortable reaching out for help, where mental health issues are destigmatized and treated with the same urgency and compassion as physical health issues.
It's about changing the conversation, moving away from judgment and shame towards understanding and support.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that mental health is a spectrum. We all experience highs and lows, and there are times when we might need extra support. There's no shame in admitting that. In fact, it's a sign of incredible strength and self-awareness.
You know, one thing that's always struck me about this case is the impact it had on Phil Hartman's legacy. Here's this man who brought so much laughter to the world, and his story ends in such a tragic, violent way. Does that taint his legacy?
It's a complex question, I think. It's important to acknowledge the tragedy, to honor the victims, and to learn from the circumstances that led to their deaths. But I also believe it's important to remember and celebrate Phil Hartman's incredible talent, the joy he brought to so many people.
It's about holding both the light and the shadow, right? Recognizing the complexity of a life, the good and the bad, and understanding that even in the darkest of circumstances, there can still be beauty and light to be found.
Beautifully put. And I think that's a message that resonates with all of us. We're all complex beings, capable of great love and great pain. And it's in those moments of vulnerability, in those moments when we acknowledge our struggles and reach out for support, that true healing can begin.
This has been a heavy but incredibly important conversation. Phil Hartman's story, while deeply tragic, is a reminder that we need to be more attuned to the struggles of those around us, to create a culture of compassion and support, and to seek help when we need it.
Well said. And remember, you're not alone. There are resources available, people who care, and a path toward healing.
And before we wrap up, a quick reminder to our listeners. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health or substance abuse, please reach out for help. There are resources available, people who care, and a path toward healing.
Don't hesitate to seek support. You're not alone.
Phil Hartman's comedic brilliance continues to entertain and inspire, but his tragic end serves as a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. And to our listeners, we want to leave you with this. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and never underestimate the power of seeking help when you need it.
Remember, there's strength in vulnerability, and there's hope in reaching out for support.
And as always, thank you for joining us here at CrimePod Castle. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insightful deep dives into the world of true crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, stay vigilant.